All right, Big Bang. Today is Friday. It is December 28th. Welcome to the Dog Walk presented by Barstool Sports. It's True Crime Friday today, people. But before we hop into it, we got to talk about the wood grooming product that is on this blackjack table in front of us. Wood grooming. It's a new grooming line offered by Barstool Sports, and it is products across the hair, across the body, across the beard, and across the shape. I don't know. I probably said too many acrosses there, but you get my point. You got a lot of things you could work on. They got the beard oil. They got the shampoo and conditioner. And it works and it smells great. It works. It smells as good as it looks. I think that was the line I was supposed to say. So go check out Wood Grooming. You can get it at getwood.com. That's wood, WOULD.com, getwood.com. Or you can grab it at your CVS. All products are $15 or less. All products are sulfate free. They got the beard and shave, beard conditioners, oil, shaving cream. So like if you're one of those guys who just kind of shaves it and forgets it, maybe look into some of this and try to get that beard a little more spunky. It is Friday night after all, so go do it. Getwood.com or grab it at your CVS. It's that easy. Get Wood Grooming, Barstool's new grooming line. Go check it out. All right, Allie, what's the topic of today?
Okay, today we are discussing Hannah Anderson, or the Anderson family, I should say. This case, I will say, a little bit of a spoiler alert, it does have a somewhat of a good ending.
Okay, we like to hear that.
Yeah.
I mean, we always like to hear that.
I mean, compared to the endings I usually give you,
yeah,
this one's better, on the better side of things.
Okay.
So, the Anderson family consisted of the two parents, Christina and Brett, and their two kids, Hannah, who was 16, and Ethan, who was 8. And they all lived in California. And this case takes place in 2013. So not really all that long ago. So a few days, before everything I'm about to tell you that happens, a few days prior, Hannah, who was 16 at the time, had exchanged a couple of text messages with a family friend whose name was Jim DiMaggio, a.k.a. Uncle Jim. He was Brett, the dad, his best friend. So he was a family friend, again, like an uncle to them. She had exchanged a couple of text messages with him, which come back into play. Essentially, it was to coordinate Uncle Jim picking up Hannah from cheerleading practice on Saturday. Now, Jim was, again, like I said, he was the Anderson father, Brett, his good friend. He'd been a close family friend for years and years. Obviously, if your kids are calling him uncle, that's, it's a person they're close with.
Yeah.
They're comfortable with, they're close with, whatever. Jim was actually hitting a pretty hard time in 2013, though. He was about to lose his house, which was in Boulevard, California, and that is about 65 miles east of San Diego, just for reference. Jim was about to actually, though, lose this house due to money issues. So that weekend in August, for a weekend in August, Christina and Hannah and Ethan all decided that they were going to go up to Jim's house, spend one last weekend there to kind of comfort Jim and help him through this hard time. And they also just to have like one more enjoyable weekend up there. There was go-karts that they liked to ride up there and, one last hurrah. And this is why Hannah was coordinating Jim picking her up from cheerleading practice or cheerleading camper. And he was going to pick her up, take her up there so that they could all meet them up there. At least that is what Jim wanted the family to believe. That's why they were going up there. Now, fast forward. So they went up there for the weekend. Fast forward to that Sunday night. Firefighters actually discovered that Jim's house was engulfed in flames and it was burning to the ground, but Jim was nowhere to be found. So firefighters get a call of a house fire. They show up. This house is engulfed in flames. The homeowner, they can't find him. Again, this is, you could kind of view this in a couple different ways, right? Firefighters are not police investigators. They're obviously number one job is to put out the fire. But two, I would think that the first kind of thought here would be, what if he's still inside, right? We gotta see if anybody's still inside. We gotta get out whoever we can get out. Now, firefighters did find other individuals that were still in the home. However, they had met a kind of a different fate. They were not alive. There was this thing. So they went into the garage. There was this like green tarp, and it was, they unfolded it, and in it they found 2 human bodies, deceased human bodies. They were all bloodied up. There was a bloody crowbar and a deceased dog, which I hate doing ones that involve animals, but unfortunately there was a deceased dog. Now, both of these bodies, obviously the house was engulfed in flames. Both of these bodies were, just burned beyond recognition. But there was, they could see hair that was still on the body, and it was determined that these 2 bodies were 44-year-old Christina Anderson, who was the mom, and her son, Ethan Anderson, who was 8 years old. So again, Jesus. Just a brutal, brutal scene to be uncovering here. It was very clear to authorities that Christina had been gagged and also beaten to death. So not only has her body been severely burned by this fire, but that is clearly not what killed her. So she was not burned enough to where that evidence was destroyed. Now, investigators also found evidence that Jim was the one who had murdered both Christina and Ethan pretty quickly right off the bat. Then, obviously, it was pieced together that Jim was the one. He murdered Christina. He murdered Ethan. Obviously, there was a dog involved. He made part of the dog because they were all wrapped up in the tarp together. And then the bloody crowbar was in the tarp as well. So, assuming that's what he beat Christina with. Now, then, like I said, then it all became clear that he set his house fire. He was about to lose his house anyways. So to him, setting his house on fire he was going to lose it anyways. But he set it on fire to try and cover it up, to try and burn the evidence. An Amber Alert. So looking at this scene, you've got just 2 brutal triple, if you include the dog, homicide. But you don't have Hannah, who was also there that weekend. She's also nowhere to be found. So now we've got a whole nother issue that we need to deal with. An Amber Alert went out immediately for Hannah. She's only 16 years old at this point. But no one was able to locate her. So obviously this is a very pressing issue for a missing child in general, but pair it with all of this, a burning house, a dead mother and the dead brother who were brutally beaten and killed. Their main focus was, we have to find Hannah. Now, this is very interesting, right? Because Jim was nowhere to be found. Hannah was nowhere to be found. The Amber Alert was put out. They could not locate Hannah or Jim for several days. Now, based on the location of where this all took place, again, we're in California, it was, a consideration of what might be going on here is that Jim had made a run for the Mexican border with Hannah in tow. So he had kidnapped Hannah and was making a run for Mexico. This, again, presents a whole nother slew of problems, right? Because once they cross that border, we can't keep chasing them, or we can't keep looking for them in Mexico.
Is that how it works? I
mean, jurisdictionally, right? U.S. authorities cannot cross the borders. You can
the
work
FBI
with
and shit can, right?
Not really.
No.
I mean, yes and no. Like, they've got an alliance, right? They're going to work with. They're going to work with Mexican authorities, but we can't just go storming into Mexico and say,
cruising around there and being like, yeah, let me check houses.
Yeah. Exactly. So, however, luckily, this was not the case. They did not flee to Mexico. After 6 days of not being able to locate Hannah, Jim's blue Nissan truck was actually spotted, in all places, in a super remote camping area in Cascade, Idaho. So they went the very opposite direction. Yeah. Now, it was discovered again, this hunt was out for Jim. This was in 2013. So, you can put Amber Alerts out. You can put be on the lookout for this truck, what have you. So his truck was actually spotted, or no, I'm sorry, I'm wrong. His truck was recognized after a couple of horseback riders going through this camping area, nature forest area. There was some horseback riders, and they saw just kind of like an uncomfortable situation, or two people that made him go, I don't know if something's not right here, because they saw Jim and they're like, oh, this guy looks kind of suspicious, because he had this teenage girl with him, Hannah, who just looked like they weren't on like a father-daughter camping trip here, right? They were like, I don't know if this is completely voluntary. So they reported it to authorities, and that's when Jim's blue Nissan truck, which was also in the area, was found and recognized. They ran the plates over there, and they're like, this is Jim's. So now authorities, again, were in this big, like, national forest or state park, whatever have you, a giant, remote, and wooded area. One of the hardest places to search for people, right? This was, again, like, authorities can start, so they started a ground search initially. This place was massive. Like, it could take days to search this place. It was no easy feat. The park was huge. It was strenuous. Essentially, it was a perfect place for people to hide. We talked about this in the Gabby Petito case. National forests, heavily wooded areas, places that are hard to reach. They're also hard to search. The U.S. Marshal Service, so in this area, even though it was kind of a more remote area and we were in Idaho, the U.S. Marshals actually had a small plane in a command center nearby. So they decided that they were going to take it up and see what they couldn't see from above, and while these ground searches were going on. They were actually unsuccessful at first. They had made a couple of laps. They didn't really see anything, but they were like, all right, we'll take one more lap and then we'll head in. That is when they saw a blue tent. It was also, and this is actually what tipped them off, was they knew that this had to be Jim, or most likely was Jim, and hopefully Hannah, was evidence that was found prior when they were, searching the home and trying to get their research on Jim, was that he had purchased a blue tent and camping gear. So he had purchased a blue tent. They were above. They saw this blue tent. They were like, aha, I think we're good to go. This has to be him. So federal authorities, so including the FBI, had strategically placed themselves throughout this forest to try and get their number one goal in this situation was, yes, they needed to get Jim, but more so, they needed to get Hannah safe.
Yeah, make sure she was okay.
Right. So the extraction, a safe extraction, was, obviously we know this guy is violent. We don't know what he's got on him, and we need to safely extract her before we deal with him. So again, they placed themselves kind of strategically around to try and access him or have the least amount of trouble possible and be able to kind of corner him, if you will. They actually spotted, the marshals that were in the air, they spotted Hannah like up waving her arms above her head at the plane. And she was waving her arms for help. Now, this, she had this like white handkerchief she was waving. She was trying to get she saw the plane. She was trying to get their attention. Jim had actually gone off to look for more firewood. So she had the wherewithal with her to be like, there's a plane flying overhead. I need help. Let me wave my hands, wave this handkerchief. Maybe, just maybe they'll see me. And it worked. I mean, they did see her. So FBI had this rule in place while they were doing this search and trying to do this extraction, was there needed to be, before they were strategically placed, essentially they were like hiding in the woods waiting to make their move. Once they located where Hannah was, they moved in, but they were still out of sight, if you will. So they had a rule where they could not, there needed to be a safe amount of distance between Hannah and Jim before they move in, because if he's standing right next to her, he could grab her, hold her hostage. He could harm her in some way, what have you. So that was really, there needed to be a safe distance before they made their move. Now, so Hannah's starting to wave her arms, like, okay, Jim is out looking for firewood. This is our chance. So they locate him. Jim did have a gun on him. So the search concluded with a deadly shootout. And Jim got shot 5 times, and he was deceased right there. So unfortunately, it kind of went out guns a-blazing. But the good news is Hannah was unharmed. She was rescued alive, unharmed. I guess we'll say that loosely, right? She still had lost family members. She was kidnapped, the whole 9 yards, but she was not killed or physically harmed in the process. And she was returned to her father immediately. You can imagine had to have been a wreck, right?
Oh yeah. And she wasn't assaulted or anything? It wasn't like
not that I really that went into depth. Again, when you have a case with a child, they don't always go into a ton of depth with it. But it was, one of the kind of motives that was explored was that the text messages that were exchanged between the two, they did seem to be innocent as far as like coordinating picking her up from practice, but a motive was speculated that Jim obviously had some interest in Hannah more than innocent, right? So that's why he decided that he had fallen on hard times. Who knows if he kind of had a break or whatever, but he obviously didn't kill Hannah, he killed Ethan and he killed Christina, but he took Hannah with him. So you can't really rule that out either. It's totally potential. There's definitely potential that she was assaulted in some way, or he was planning to assault her in some way, or he clearly had a plan that involved Hannah, or had this interest in Hannah for some reason. But she was rescued alive. She was returned to her father. This poor 16-year-old girl just endured so much trauma at such a young age that it did take a lot of work, obviously, to try and undo. You can't really undo that, but undo, for lack of a better word. But all in all, she did get out alive. Now, it's come out that a potential driving factor in this horrible, kidnapping, murder, arson, the whole 9 yards that Jim's being charged on, may have been because he had a crush on Hannah, like I said. When FBI did a search of Jim's property that he had tried to burn down, they found handcuff boxes and other restraints that indicated that Hannah was taken against her will. When the horseback riders spotted them, they knew like something's not right here. And investigators also conducted a search of Jim's email, which did lead to some kind of more sketchy clues as well. Indicated in emails to Hannah, he had said something along the lines of he was afraid that she was growing up and was no longer the young girl that viewed her as Uncle Jim. To me, that's very creepy. Also, very creepy to send something like that in an email.
Yeah.
Totally. So the whole idea behind he had this interest in Hannah is completely possible. Oddly enough, when the two... this is just so weird to me. When the two were spotted in the park, when they finally spotted Jim, or the horseback rider spotted Jim, he had Hannah, but he also had a cat. He was carrying a cat. It's just so odd to me because you're monstrous. This monstrous human being kills a woman and a child brutally, sets the house on fire, kills a dog, kidnaps a 16-year-old girl, but God forbid the cat gets hurt.
You're showing affection to a different pet. Yeah.
Yeah. So he took his cat, and Jim had a cat. They knew Jim had a cat. So then they spotted this girl, doesn't look so good, and he's got a cat.
Yeah.
Who brings their cat camp? I don't know. Is that normal to bring your cat camping? I'm not a cat person, so I don't know, but I would say no. And also just so odd that he brought his cat. So Jim, like I said, went out, guns blazing. He was deceased on scene right there, but Hannah was returned alive, unfortunately. Obviously, this wreaked havoc. He's still having lost her mother and her brother.
Yeah, horrible. Like, there's definitely trauma from all that, I'm sure. So
100%.
Hope she's doing all right. She
made it out alive.
Yeah.
So that's more that we can say for a lot of the other cases that we covered.
Yeah.
So take what you can get at that point. And like you said, we hope she's doing well. We hope she's gotten the help and the tools that she's needed. But that'll wrap it up.
I see here too, just Googling, it looks like they did a Lifetime movie about her, and
yeah,
it seems like she was very upset about it. She was furious over it. But
yeah, there was some like controversy. I think of to my knowledge of how like Lifetime portrayed it, or how Lifetime kind of pieced it together, which I know we've seen in several other cases where, you know, one of the missing persons shows, or we'll do an episode on it, or like they'll make a movie out of it, and it's just like it's inaccurate, it's not representing it correctly, or it makes these promises and it doesn't deliver, you know, those kinds of things. Again, it's Lifetime, so you can imagine that.
Well, hopefully, you know, we got pretty much everything right here, and then that's the case of, you know, the Anderson family, and like you said, you just hope she's doing well.
Yeah.
Okay, Allie, thank you. Thank you, everybody, for listening. That's it for today. That's it for this week. We will see you guys on Monday.